It's awesome finally seeing like just having South Africans on the global stage. Trevor Noah, another big one of ours,
Yep.
exports, recent exports. And even in the music scene, like seeing like Tyler, last night she won MTV award
Yes.
for Afro beats, which is amazing. So we are slowly starting to be seen and accepted more on a global stage, which is fantastic, and absolutely it does inspire the filmmaking, but I think it inspires like kind of all the arts that are being created here in South Africa.
What a simcha. I would like to thank my beautiful wife, Nats. Team Diamond would be lost without you.
Justin, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant.
Got yourself in a bit of a pickle there, boy. She's batshit crazy, Dovey.
For me to keep quiet, it is going to cost you 100 million rand. 1,000,000 rand.
If I do this, you stepping into a world that's very different from the one you know, my boy. This is her dress.
Welcome back to one of our another convos. Today joining us is director, filmmaker Ari Kruger. Talk about his just released feature-length film, The Shakedown. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dario. Good to be here, man.
So we're just going to hop right into it. First off, we like to ask kind of like how you first got into film and what were kind of like the things that brought you to this point in your career.
I was one of those annoying kids who always had a video camera when I was young. So my dad brought it into the house and then immediately started playing with it. So from a young age, I was experimenting with video and using the VHS machines to edit. So the love came quite early. And then when I finished school, I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. There weren't actually film schools at the time when I finished. So I went to animation and studied 3D animation and then got into the world of visual effects. And then through that, while I was doing that, I kept making short films on the side. And then at some point, I got a short film of mine got into this festival in Australia called Trop Fest, which is known as the world's largest short film festival. And after I got into that, I was like, cool, I'm going to make the transition into directing, and then didn't work for like a year because everyone knew me as an animator. But then slowly started to get commercial work, and I was doing music videos and kept making short films, and that kept. And then we doing web series, and that led me to a TV series. But the feature film was always this kind of elusive thing that I'd always wanted to make, and then it finally happened last year.
Okay. I didn't know you were into animation. So I guess what were some like the first films, the first, I guess, influences that you can kind of point to like really kind of push you in this direction of filmmaking?
Right. It wasn't Star Wars, like most people would say. I don't really watch Star Wars in like my late 20s. But I really loved like the filmmaking style of, say, someone like Robert Rodriguez, because he's a DIY filmmaker and he was doing everything himself. He was shooting himself, cutting himself. And that kind of process spoke to me from a young age. So I loved all his early like El Mariachi, Desperado, those kind of films. And that led me to like Steven Soderbergh, also indie filmmaker, who's also, wears more hats than one. Spike Jonze, that whole director's series music videos was a huge influence on me as I was getting into filmmaking. And I just loved the whole creative aspect of it, but, being a bit more hands-on in the process. That always spoke to me about filmmaking, and I still try retain as much of that as I can today. Like I'll always board my own. If I'm filming anything, I'll always board it myself, which I really enjoy doing. And I don't edit so much these days anymore, but having come from editing as well, like it's just helpful when it comes to shooting. When you're directing, you're shooting for the edit. And then when I'm working with an editor, it's clearer communication because I guess from understanding that process,
Yeah. Okay. And I guess you said you came through South Africa. You're from South Africa, and obviously the film industry. So what is the film industry kind of like in South Africa compared to, what people are more familiar with, like Hollywood or like in the French film cinema?
It's still quite a young industry. Well, maybe not necessarily young, but still a developing industry. Growing up in South Africa, we didn't have that many South African films coming out that that resonated with us. There was a lot of like slapstick comedy films. and also just because of the history of South Africa and how fractured it's been with apartheid, and it's just been a bit of a strange place when it comes to filmmaking, because the audience is so diverse, and it's not like you can make one film in South Africa that's going to speak to the wide audience that exists here, and the kind of the different classes and the different races. But so I think from that perspective, it's always been a bit of a difficult kind of a little bit of a challenge. But that said, I would say in the last 10 years, the industry in South Africa has been booming, and especially with streamers having arrived, Netflix is commissioning a lot of local content that's starting to perform well on a global stage, from the series to the films. There's other streamers like Amazon, who we made our movie with. They were here and they commissioned our film. And I don't think there's ever been a better time to be making stuff now than in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of, like, I guess, like you said, there weren't like a ton of big name mainstream projects or directors that have come from South Africa, but there are some kind of, like, obviously, like Neil Blomkamp is the one that obviously comes to mind for most people. You had like Charlize Theron, and you had like what's his name?
Also Copley.
Yes. You already know what I was talking about. So yes. So like, obviously there was some success, and I guess seeing them kind of break through and get kind of like that more mainstream appeal and love and appreciation, did that kind of like inspire you even more to kind of do your own thing too as well?
Very much so. It's awesome finally seeing, like, just having South Africans on the global stage. Trevor Noah, another big one of ours, recent exports. And even in the music scene, like seeing like Tyler, last night she won MTV award for Afrobeats, which is amazing. So we are slowly starting to be seen and accepted more on a global stage, which is fantastic, and absolutely it does inspire the filmmaking, but I think it inspires like kind of all the arts that are being created here in South Africa. Okay.
And coming up, you said like you started also doing like web series. I think it was Suzelle DIY, Tylee's Diary. How did that kind of help you kind of find your voice and kind of, I guess, eye for directing and like how you want to storytell and create film?
Yeah, so with Suzelle DIY, that's a web series my wife and I started doing together, and she is Suzelle, and I was shooting and directing that, and we were writing and conceptualizing it together. And that was the kind of thing which just really like honed my comedic skill set with regards to timing and blocking and, I guess, style, and it was almost like putting myself in my own version of film school, with learning about comedy in a deeper way, because we just made so many of these episodes. I mean, we've made like over 150 of them, which was just like it was just great to just hone in on the craft and work within the confines that we'd created for ourselves, but then also see how we could push those boundaries too and be creative within the parameters that we had set for ourselves. And then that led to us doing the Tylee's Diary series, which was, that was with Showmax, our local streamer. And that was a mockumentary on a much bigger scale. And then that also, again, just crafting storytelling, narrative, comedy again, working with actors and performers. It's all just been like a huge learning curve and just honing the craft, which made doing the feature last year a much more seamless experience because of having come through all the things that I'd made previously.
Yeah, I mean, also think about it. Like, I do think like a lot of these like YouTube and more online platforms are giving a lot of like filmmakers and directors that opportunity to kind of like find their voice and get actual film out and basically work out the process without having to spend. Obviously, the barrier used to be much higher back in the day. So what do you think about like that new lower barrier of entry for like filmmakers and directors and storytellers to kind of come through?
Yeah, I mean, you said it so well. It's incredible. I think because of it, we're seeing a whole generation now of filmmakers emerging who have come from the YouTube space that are creating the most insane stuff. Like seasoned commercial directors look at some of the things the YouTubers are doing and they're like, how was this done? So it's amazing how the internet and technology just, leveled the playing field that anyone can really get up and make whatever they want to make and make it on quite a high level, even without necessarily having superior gear. So I'm all for that, because my whole career was, as like someone who's embraced just being able to do things themselves, like my whole career wouldn't be where it was had it not been for YouTube, and being able to just make things on our own terms.
Yeah, I definitely think like industry wise, I do think like they're kind of shifting their sentiment and like, maybe a little snobby and a little like turn their nose up to that. But I do think that they're kind of like coming around to seeing the value in that and like appreciating kind of that form more and more.
Absolutely. Especially with TikTok. I mean, the film industry is suffering the way that it is. Sure, because of COVID, but really, I think because of TikTok. Yeah. Everyone's just like, young people would rather just stay at home at night and be on TikTok than like go to the movies or even really watch a film. So I think they're going to have to take even more like serious notice in the next.
Yeah, it is very interesting. Because like I have like younger nieces and, you're like, do you want to watch this movie? Like, no, I'm just going to spend my time watching like these TikTok videos for the next 2 hours. It's like, you don't want to watch this well-produced $100 million film, but no, you'd rather watch somebody on their smartphone doing a dance for like 2 hours. It's kind of crazy.
It is absolutely crazy, man. But it's the inevitable future. I don't know. One wants to resist it, but I think you got to embrace it the best way you can.
With I forget what was that short film streaming service that didn't last very long that they put like billions of dollars in, but they tried, but I just don't think they understood why people were so into kind of that more short form of creating.
Yeah, right.
So talking about Shakedown, first of all, congrats. I watched it. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'm impressed. I'm very interested to see kind of like how you came about with this film. Kind of was the writing process. What was your from like conception to production? Like how did you get there?
So I don't know. I just had this kind of the thing in South Africa. You get this private healthcare. And with that comes these particular kind of brokers who are unique to South Africa, just with the point system, the way they swoop into your office and like try sell you and upsell you on these packages. And I don't know. And just having engaged with these guys, my wife and I were always like, we should make something just based off this kind of character because they're so funny. And so obsessed with health and points and it's kind of filtered through into South Africans, I guess, like a middle to upper class South Africans who embrace this. It's like almost like a way of living. So that was the first kind of idea of like, just having this character and being quite like a fun character. And then I've just had this fascination with the South African underworld because it's also, again, quite unique to South Africa. It's the world of organized crime, but it is deeply disorganized. Right. And it just feels like when you read about real stories that have happened and the mishaps, the hits gone wrong, these larger than life characters doing like crazy stuff. There's so much absurdity and comedy in that world. It just felt like I wanted to explore it, but like showcase it in a more comedic way. So I kind of just took the idea of this broker and the underworld, and I was like, how do I bring these two worlds together? And then that was the catalyst for where the story came about. And then as just being a fan of like crime and comedy and crime comedies, and obviously the Guy Ritchies and the Coen brothers and more modern things like Barry, the HBO series Barry, and these they were just inspiring to me, and I felt like I wanted to make a film that was in that tone, that was comedic but also had danger, and I really wanted it to be very South African, and just embrace all the weird South Africanisms and nuances that we have, with the hope that it would be able to firstly just make be enjoyable for South Africans locally, but also translate onto like a global stage.
Okay. And I guess how long did it take you from like start to finish to kind of get this completed, like edited, written, filmed, everything, and like to the final product?
Yeah, it took from first pitching it to Amazon, I'd say from then it took a year because I pitched them a pitch deck and they liked it. And then it was a case of then they wanted to see the script. So I had to write the script, and myself and my writing partner, Daniel, wrote the script. And and that took about 6 months. And then they greenlit it quite early on in the year, last year, January. And then we basically just, went into production, pre-prod production and post last year, and we had completed it by December. So the whole thing took about, say, like a year, 2 years to make.
Okay. And I do think, especially when it comes to casting, like, you think you guys nailed it. Everybody played their parts extremely well. So kind of how did you kind of find the right cast for this and pick their roles and everything? How was that process?
Yeah, it was a mix. Like some of the guys I'd worked with before, like obviously my wife, Julia, plays the wife in the film. So that was, we always knew she was going to play that character. And then Jack Parrow, who's a famous South African rapper. I'd done music videos for him before, and I knew he was a funny guy, and he's also quite gangster. So it just felt like I just gave him the role of that kind of bumbling gangster character, Mikey, because he's funny and he just looks amazing. Yeah. And a friend of mine, Milton, who I've worked with many, he played the bad guy, the main hitman, Henko. And then we cast out for the other roles, and it was tricky because I needed to find a leading man who was a really good performer, really good actor, but also got comedy. And that could also make a very unlikable character likable just through his natural charm. So it was really a big win to get Carl Bierkes, and we had to fly him down from LA. And then it was really even a bigger win that Dovi, who's played by Emmanuel Castus, him and Emmanuel and Carl were old friends, which I only discovered in like the chemistry read. And once I discovered that, it was just like, gotta go with these guys. They just had such a natural chemistry. And then Berenice Barbio, who plays Marika, was someone that I'd discovered because I was trying to do a short film, and she auditioned and she was amazing. And I was like, oh, I've got to use her for something. She's just so good.
Well, I think perfectly casted. Everybody was perfect for their roles, and like, could definitely feel like the chemistry, especially between the two leads. And like, it was just like, it just matched perfectly. One thing I did notice, like you kind of mentioned, is like a lot of them were like, it's hard to balance because they're mostly all unlikable characters. So like, how do you kind of balance that and keep people still like engaged? Because it's a tough thing to do in like storytelling.
Yeah, it was a challenge, and I hope it succeeded. I think it seems that some people didn't. Not everyone feels the same way, and maybe just didn't like the characters or the main character. But I don't know. We just try to make them human, and show that they are just flawed human beings like we all are, and that is part of the message of the film. So every character in the film is flawed, and including the rabbi. So like, I just wanted to embrace the duality of man, and hopefully offer some kind of redemptive arc, especially for our lead character and for Dovi as well. Like, they kind of go through the film, and by the end, I feel like as an audience, or certainly for myself, I would certainly grow to love them by the end, and I would hope the audiences feel the same way.
Yeah, I feel like, especially when I was watching it, was like, especially when you brought like the rabbi, when he came by, I was like, oh, he's a terrible person too. So like at this point, like they're not that bad, because like everybody's just equally kind of like shitty in their own way.
Yeah, right.
And you were speaking about influences, obviously like dark comedy, and like there's been a lot of very iconic films from that. And obviously like comes to mind immediately would be like Fargo from like, Coen brothers. And like, I guess, can you kind of speak to like that influence? Was that kind of on your mind a little bit when you were kind of coming up with the story and like trying to capture that tone, because it's such an iconic like film in like dark comedy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Fargo left such an impression on me when I watched it when I was much younger. And of course, in just having gone through all the Coen brothers catalog, I'm a huge fan. Coen brothers, some Guy Ritchie. It was like, just an amalgamation, I guess, of all the things that I love. But I feel like when it comes to comedy, my favorite kinds of comedy are when it's grounded in reality. And the comedy comes through characters who are real being put in extreme and absurd situations. That's always resonated for me as like the funniest kind of comedy, more than just like a broad style comedy. So with this, very much just try to play into that tone and into that style. And then, of course, I'm just a huge fan of like Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm. So that also found its way in as like an influence. And that certainly influenced our Tully series. But with this one, I definitely wanted to explore like a darker tone, because I feel like through the darkness, you get a lot of comedy, especially if you can balance it right.
Was there any like improv going on? Like, were you giving them room to kind of do like a little bit of improvisation between each other?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big fan of improvisation, and, we obviously had the script, but I was always encouraging the actors to play and to come up with their own lines, put things in their own words. For me, those are the nuggets that, we get them right. Those moments absolutely make it into the cut.
And I guess like, obviously when you do that, you can get some great moments, but also like that can leave a lot of like stuff on the cutting room floor. So like, were there any like moments or scenes that you kind of wish that you could have gotten in there that you just couldn't?
Yeah, there were some lines and some moments that, I tried, but sometimes depending on where you're at in the film and the pace and like where the story is, you sometimes just want to keep the pace going. And then if you're letting it stop and letting it pause for random ramblings of improv, which are funny, the timing of that comedy may not be right for where you are at, like in the narrative. So that was actually a big lesson I learned in this film, because I was always just like, let's put it in. My editor was like, yeah, but we should be moving along now, because, we're about to hit the third act and things need to keep going. It's maybe not a good idea for the lawyer to start talking about, I don't know, that he's got a bad back or, or whatever. Needs to go to the physio for the bad back. So yeah, it's so there were certainly some moments that, just couldn't make it in, but that's how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, editing for sure when it comes to films, probably the hardest part of it when you think about it is like, there's so much that you end up filming that you don't even put into it. So kind of how is like that process finally like getting the final cut, and was it an easy edit or was it like a hard edit? Like how was that?
Yeah, it was both. It was like, I learned a lot of lessons in this edit, because I think it was my first feature. And our first cut was close to 2 hours, and I thought that would be fine. But then when I watched the 2-hour cut when we brought the commissioning editors in to like show them, I immediately just felt this movie is too long and it's too slow. That was their note too. And then we had to go back and really just kind of decide what's going to go and what's going to stay. And that's not like we overshot. It was quite economical. It just worked out that, it just landed up being a bit longer, probably because I kept a lot of the improv in.
Yeah. And
then we just cut it down and really just looked at the pacing and how to keep the energy up and keep the audience engaged. And, if things weren't working or they were slowing it down, then we cut it.
I mean, who knows? You might get like a Zack Snyder 3-hour director's cut after all this.
Yeah. Jeez, man.
So I guess how, like, we kind of talked about how you can like balance the comedy with like the darkness, and like it is a almost surprisingly dark film at times. How do you kind of find that balance between like the humor and the comedy of it versus like kind of like the craziness that is also happening on screen at the same time?
Yeah, it's a good question, because to be honest, I don't know how I do it. It's like, it's not conscious. Like I think I use comedy as a device of surprise. So if things are dark and serious, if you throw something in that's comedic, it surprises the audience and it's funny and unexpected. So I use that as a device a lot. But then I did try, when things were getting a bit more emotional, and especially with the characters and you're dealing with a bit more heart in the scene, I would try and step down, just kind of rest the comedy in those moments. Just let the moments be what they needed to be, or the authenticity be what it needed to be. But for the most part, I'm always finding a gag in every scene, and, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it is a balance. And I think it's something that's intuitive. And when I'm watching it, I can feel if it's right or not. But it's a difficult one to articulate. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Barry, which is, a show that came out recently that got a lot of love for a lot of reasons, and like is one that resonated with me. And I very similar. They had like very, very dark, violent moments, but then like seconds later be like undercut by like this comical moment that maybe shouldn't have been comical, but ended up being even funnier because of like the situation that he was in.
Absolutely. Yeah, Barry, they did really well in that show.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, when shit goes down, it goes down. But then, as you said, the next thing you're killing yourself laughing, and the characters are so good.
Which also kind of brought me like, what's some of your favorite scenes? Because there is a scene in there that reminded me of Barry specifically. Like, I'm sure you maybe know what I'm talking about. Like, they go in to capture this woman, and she ends up being like this martial artist.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if there's a connection between Barry, because Barry also had a very similar scene where they like had a whole.
I think that scene was absolutely inspired by Barry. I love that episode. And I think, I can't remember during the writing phase or whatever, but I just felt like that's an example of characters being in a real situation and then discovering something which is so crazy. That is so funny. So like that cutting across the seriousness and the darkness is just so great. I probably just felt compelled to steal that because I loved it so much.
I mean, it was definitely a standout from this movie, and I saw a stand up for Barry. I was like, hold on, like now I think about it, I didn't catch it at first, but now I was thinking about the connection to Barry. I was like, oh, he had kind of a similar scene in that where like there was like this little girl in there that I thought he could just do whatever, and then turns out she's like this world class martial artist, and like I was like, oh, okay, I kind of see like maybe a connection there.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a connection there. It's just too good.
I was also talking about balancing comedy and humor. You know, every region, every country, every culture kind of has like their own sense of humor and kind of like what's funny to them. And how would you kind of describe like South African humor to somebody?
Jeez, good question, man. You know, firstly, South African humor traditionally has been quite slapstick because we've got a guy called Leon Schuster, who was the king of cinema in South Africa. His movies were really silly, and we all grew up watching them. So like slapstick comedy was like incepted into the culture of South African comedy and humor. And I think now we've kind of moved away from it and we've matured and advanced. But South Africans like to laugh at themselves. We're very diverse culture. And every culture has their own thing and their own way of, it comes through in the way that characters speak, the way that the accents, the intonation, the kinds of words we use. It's also Afrikaans, there's English, there's Xhosa, we've got 12, God, is it 12 or 13 national languages? I'll be embarrassed about that one. But, you know, there's a lot of language in South Africa.
Yeah.
And with that also comes a lot of slang and cross-pollination of the different languages. So it's like kind of a mashup, what goes on over here. And so a lot of the comedy is coming from culture. It's coming from character. And and the specifics of that. So yeah, I felt it was important to me with this film to really try and have different kinds of South African characters that all represented a different cultural group that we all feel familiar with and we can all kind of laugh at.
I mean, I'll be honest, before I knew this was like a South African film, when I was first kind of watching it, I was like very almost reminiscent of like New Zealand type humor. I don't know if you kind of see. Like, I was like, is this a New Zealand film? Then like I kept hearing, I was like, no, this is South Africa. But I definitely felt like there were some similarities to kind of like that more Kiwi, New Zealand sense of humor and South African.
Oh, that's awesome. I do believe, like, I'm a huge fan of New Zealand humor. And it's amazing to see how Kiwi humor has made its way into like Hollywood now and has become very much like an accepted brand of comedy on a global stage. And I do feel like South Africa has a chance to do that too, because we also are very specific and weird and silly and just have, as I said, just like very kind of unusual characters. And I feel like the more we're starting to hone that particular tone of comedy, I think the more chance we have of it being accessed globally.
Yeah. I mean, when you mentioned it, it was kind of like how you're like South African, the criminal underworld has like this kind of comic almost undertone to it. But looking back at like kind of like some of Neil Blomkamp's films. You can also see that in like a lot of his work, and like a lot of his criminals and a lot of like his more underbelly had like almost like this slapstick humorous approach to it that they don't really know what's going on. And it's like, now that you mentioned, I was like, I kind of like see that also like in his work.
Absolutely. If you watch District 9, the opening like 20 minutes of that film is a mockumentary where like Vickers van der Merwe is just fumbling his way through this crazy world of like dangerous aliens, but he's a fool.
Yeah.
And like that is absolutely like the epitome of South African humor, because you've got this dimwit guy, who's and he's Afrikaans, and Afrikaans also it's like a offshoot of Dutch. And Afrikaans culture gets used a lot in comedy because I guess of the specific ways that Afrikaans people speak. It's funny and be funny. And so it's all those things that we mine as directors and storytellers to like showcase the best version of ourselves to the world.
I guess one of my last questions about the film itself is like, what was some of the hardest parts to film? And also, have you filmed like much action scenes before you got to this?
No, I hadn't done too much action. This was my first I'd done like a bit here and there, but not on the scale. And I tried some things that I felt worked out in this one. Some things not as successful. Whenever we were able to like really previs and shoot it with the actors on location before, cut that together, all those scenes came together great, because it just takes a lot of time and finessing to make sure you're shooting the action right. So I'd say broad strokes, like, action. There was a lot of action in this, and I actually kept telling myself, this is not an action comedy. It's a crime comedy. Like the action should always feel real. But when looking at it now, I'm like, there was quite a bit of action going down. Yeah. I'm quite inspired by like action films from Australia, because they keep it quite grounded and they don't cut on impact. So I always tried to keep that up in this film. Like if she's throwing the prosthetic penis at his face, it's like, show that, but don't cut when it hits his face. Yeah. I think I try to do that a lot, because I feel like those moments then land the best.
Yeah, definitely.
Action was it. What's that?
So you could definitely feel it. It definitely felt like real and visceral.
Oh, awesome, man. Thank you.
So I guess you were saying like action films probably maybe some of the hardest parts for you to film, considering it's like kind of first time doing it.
Yeah, action. And then, the biggest challenge actually was just the weather. We shot through the winter in Cape Town. It rained so much, and we got like sideways rain. The wind, into the side. So there were a few days where we just were like rained out, and we had to wait for it to clear and shoot in between the rain. That was tough. Other than that, man, it was like a pretty cool, like seamless, straightforward shoot with action, shooting on a boat at night. There were a couple of hairier things that we had to do, but it was great. It was, I think we planned pretty well, which meant the shoot went pretty well.
Okay. And I guess, what was kind of the process for you to pitch this to Amazon? Was like your first pitch, or did you go to other places? Like how did you kind of get to Amazon, and like what's been your like partnership and relationship and collaboration been with them to this point?
Yeah, so they reached out to us at the beginning, I don't know, like 2 years ago, because they were entering the market in South Africa and Nigeria, and they were looking for production companies to partner up with and looking for content to commission. And we had early meetings with them, and, they were also just mining for data and wanted to understand the landscape of South Africa film and TV. So, we were also kind of sharing what we know and our experiences, and we started discussing and talking about things like that. And then they asked us to share some projects and ideas we had, and we have a slate of projects that we've been wanting to make, movies, TV series. And this was a new addition to that slate. And, we pitched some projects. This one was just a 1-page at the time, and they liked it. And then I sent them like a more fully formed deck, which, explained the whole story and definitely captured the mood and the tone. And they liked it, and then asked for the script. And then the script we delivered to them in a few months from then. And things actually moved quite fast from them. It was one of those kind of crazy things that sometimes it feels like it's going, and then it goes. Because most of the time as filmmakers, you're just hitting brick walls all the time. But this was different. And I think because they were entering the market, they needed to get going quite quickly. From what I've heard, they always do LOL, which is like a TV series with comedians all in a house like Big Brother. That's the first thing they do in a territory. And then the second thing they do is a comedy. So they were looking for a comedy, and timing just worked out perfectly that we could offer them a comedy that they liked. But then they left. So they arrived in South Africa. They were commissioning work, and then they did like a global restructure, and they pulled out of all these emerging territories in the world, South Africa included. So like as we finished the film, they pulled out of the country and retrenched the whole team that they had hired, who were all amazing people and really good at what they were doing. And so they might come back. I'm not sure. But my relationship with the global Amazon team, it's not, a lot of those people moved around and changed.
So they're no longer in South Africa.
No, you can still get Prime Video and use the service, but they aren't commissioning work in South Africa nor Nigeria. They pulled out of a whole lot of, third world or emerging territories. So it was quite a shock to us and to the industry.
That is one thing about streaming and streamers, is that it's very volatile at this moment, like in terms of like streamers and what they're planning. And you never really know if they're going to keep doing this or they're going to like pull back here. It's like that is certainly something that's new to navigate for like a lot of people in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's crazy. Just hear everyone, friends of mine and people working with different streamers. It's precarious right now because of TikTok. No, I'm kidding.
Everything's because of TikTok.
But I know it's all shifting so fast that when these opportunities come, the more prepared you are, the better chance you have of actually getting something made. But there's no guarantee that in a year from now, like that streamer will even be there or commissioning things. Yeah. So just trying to take these opportunities as they come.
So you're one of the few South African films to have ever come out on Amazon.
Yeah, it's the first commissioned film, and for now, the only one.
Wow, that's great.
But I'm sure, I do believe that things will turn around again in the future.
Are there other like major studios in South Africa?
Netflix.
Okay.
Netflix is commissioned. I'm working on a Netflix series at the moment as a director, and they're doing some cool stuff. But other than that, no, not really. We service a lot of big productions. Like One Piece season 2 is being shot currently in Cape Town. We service pretty like really big productions, and as a result, our crew in South Africa they're excellent because they've really had to step up their game. But productions like coming to South Africa because it's cost effective, it's beautiful, you can kind of shoot it for any location. And I think they also get to have a good time when they're, especially in Cape Town, they get to have a good old holiday or work experience while shooting there.
Okay, so I guess what are some of your like biggest takeaways and lessons from your first feature film?
I think the pace, as I mentioned earlier, was a big one. If I was making my second one, I think I'll be much more conscious of pace and, for example, what coverage to get when you're shooting a scene that's maybe in the middle of the film or towards the end of the film. You don't always just want to have a long one or one long take because you want to be able to get in there and cut it up if you need to increase pace. So that was like the big takeaway for me. And just being like as prepared as possible. Like you just cannot prepare enough because you just never want to be in a position where you're like scratching your head and like, how are we going to make this work? It's particularly with the action stuff. But and also just writing and making sure that the script can be is just as watertight as possible, because I'm a big believer in just writing, right. I guess that saying of like writing's not finished, it's abandoned. But I just feel like the more the script can be the best version it can be, the better film you're going to have. Because if you're going in with a script that's average, you're just not going to, you're going to get an average film, So I want to spend a lot more time in the writing process for the next one.
Okay. And I guess how's the reception been, especially in South Africa to the movie?
Yeah, it's been received really well in South Africa. People we know that have watched it have all really had a really great experience, and I think that it's been received well. Globally, I'm not so sure. It didn't get any marketing because Amazon left, so it's kind of just been put on the platform, and people that see it, watch it, or hear about it, or are accessing it that way. But certainly in South Africa, people have been talking about it, and it seems to have performed well. I don't have stats yet from the streamer, but I would hope that they're good.
Definitely. And last thing, for people who aren't familiar with South Africa and like the film and kind of just that whole industry, what are some movies that you would point to somebody like, you should watch these if you want to get familiar with South Africa?
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so obviously District 9, which I think a lot of, probably one of the most popular ones to come out of here. There's a really good film called Stander, which wasn't made by South Africans, but it's about a bank robber from South Africa during apartheid who was like robbing all the banks. Really good film. Geez, man, you've put me on the spot here. What are some other good ones? Shucks, I'll have to make a list. And The Gods Must Be Crazy. I mean, that film was one of the biggest. It still holds the record, I think, for being on cinema, actually in LA, for like the longest running time, which is so bizarre. But The Gods Must Be Crazy was just this like absolute cult status film that came out. I don't know when, but years ago from South Africa. But that's all I can think of for now.
and now the Shakedown.
And now the Shakedown,
Okay. What's next for you after this? Like, where are you hoping to go? Like, you have ideas for your next film? Are you working on something? Like, what's next?
Yeah, I'm writing another crime comedy at the moment, which I'm almost finished. And and again, it's got the South African flavor and nuances and characters. And that would very much be my focus, to just, get the next feature made. And while I'm doing that, we still got our Tully series that we may do another season of that. And I'm also directing on other people's projects, which is quite cool because it doesn't require me having to write it and produce the whole thing. I can just kind of go in and direct, which I'm enjoying. But the goal and the dream is very much to just keep making features. I've had a taste of it now, and I absolutely want to do more of it.
Okay. And hopefully you get there. I mean, obviously the product shows for itself. I love the movie. I think it really captured a unique voice that you don't really get amongst like a lot of films out this way. South Africa, hopefully, keeps growing and allows more opportunities. And everybody who's watching this, where it's going up, you should definitely go stream, go watch The Shakedown now on Amazon Prime. Anybody can watch that as a subscription. And thank you for taking the time out and talking to us.
Awesome, Dario. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.